Welcome to the third and last day of our Global Perspectives Conference in 2025. My name is Wolfgang Jahrmann. I'm the Executive Director of the International Civil Society Center, and I'm very happy to facilitate today's panel, the first panel of the afternoon. Traditionally, on the last day, we want to focus on actions, on solutions, and the way forward after having so much sound analysis of the situation we're in. I want to acknowledge, though, that it has been inspiring to hear from so many speakers over the last days who are daring to take brave steps into the future, or using the call of our chair, Amitav Behar, from the first day to say we need to dare to dream. And I'm also encouraged that we are both visionary and practical at the same time. Which brings me to the theme of this afternoon's panel: actioning innovations in civil society organizations. The ICSC, the center, was founded some 18 years ago, carrying the ambition to disrupt and to innovate. Our founders saw disruption needed and happening in the sector, but they probably never foresaw the massive and accelerated disruption that happened this year and that's happening right now, which is, of course, instigated by right-wing governments and anti-rights groups. Now, this disruption happens in a context where the sector is already in significant transformation mode, partially caused by the anti-racist and decolonized movements that took real speed and impact some 10 years ago. An answer to these challenges can be to reinvent ourselves, our processes, our structures, our mandates, and the modus operandi we are applying. I have 4 outstanding panelists today who will share with us how they are innovating and maybe even reinventing the organizations they are representing. The 4 panelists that are with me or with us today are Rhea Tariq, who is the Director of Global Impact of HelpAge International. We have Chad Nico Hugh, responsible for AI strategy, learning, innovation, and impact of the World YMCA. Very pleased to have Awa Fali Ba, who is the Global Director of PACE, which stands for Policy, Advocacy, Campaign, and Engagement at Plan International. And last but not least, Benoit Pillot, who is the Interim Executive Director of SOS Children's Villages International. I invite the panel now to go through a number of questions. Let's start with Rhea of HelpAge. Rhea, your organization is being reinvented, and you've been one of the first to significantly respond to the call to decolonize, to shift power, to localize. Now you're turning HelpAge from a service delivery organization to a global network of peers. What are you trying to achieve, and how is it going?
Thanks, Wolfgang, and it's lovely to be here. Yes, as you say, HelpAge is going through a significant transition, but in many ways we are returning to who we were always meant to be. So for those of you who do not know about HelpAge International, we are a global network of over 200 organizations working in over 90 countries. But when we were set up in 1983, we were set up as a network of equals. 5 organizations, local and national organizations, came together because they believed older people needed a stronger voice and that this voice should come from the closest to the communities. But what happened over time as crisis became more complex, expectations grew, HelpAge took on increasing levels of direct delivery. And while that made sense for the moment, it gradually pulled us away from that founding model. So in 2020, when we were developing a 10-year strategy, we made an intentional decision to shift back towards a genuinely network-led approach. And earlier this year, with all the drama that unfolded in our sector, we paused to assess whether we were organized in the right way to deliver on that vision. The review confirmed that our direction is right. We don't need a new strategy, but we need to go further and faster. So we also recognize that the kinds of crises we are now dealing with, whether it's the shrinking civic space, massive change in the funding landscape, the rise of technology, requires a different model with resources and leadership closer to where decisions are made. So we consulted extensively with our staff, our network members, partners, older people's associations. And what we heard again and again was that transition cannot fit. There can't be one size fits all. So because we operate in different ecosystems, they require different forms of support, and legitimacy depends on adapting to the local reality. So how we have transition is very different, and every model looks different in different contexts. In some countries, the priority has been to help establish a national network, bringing together different actors. In others, it has meant strengthening an existing national organization with deep legitimacy. And in some complex, restrictive spaces, we supported creating small catalyst organizations who can influence systems so that older people's rights are fulfilled. So alongside that bigger shift from program delivery to establishing the network, we also stepped into more of an intentional convening and thought leadership role. And that has meant that convening cross-movement alliances, ensuring older people's voices are present in global agendas. And we have decided that we need to focus more on evidence, foresight, systems thinking, that kind of thing. And I think big part of this is going to be strengthening the ability of the network members to generate and use evidence so that they can influence their own ecosystems. And we see now our role more of stitching the network together, making it easier for members to collaborate, mobilize, and learn from each other. And just a last reflection, I think none of this has been simple. I know you're going to ask me about this, but it did, of course, involve restructuring and adapting to financial realities. And we have tried to approach it with care. And it has been a very emotional and intense process. But we are trying to work towards that longer term resilience, that the global network is agile, it's fit for future and fit for new shocks, because as we navigate the political volatility, I think the shocks are going to continue. So I think that's the direction of travel we are preparing for.
That's wonderful and very impressive, Rhea. And of course, we've been observing HelpAge over the last years, and I think there was a lot to learn from. And it's good to see that you have reasserted your mandate and the direction of travel that you're saying, but you have invested in radical changes of both your system and also reimagined your role. What do you think is the more difficult one, or what was the more difficult one for you and your colleagues and your staff to embrace?
I think we live in a world where, we're used to working in a certain way. We have our own habits and we're very comfortable with that. But then the reality is the external world has changed significantly. There has been exponential changes in the external landscape. So to make that mindset shift, to make that cultural shift of letting go, that was painful internally. But what I was most surprised also was about when we've been going to our network members who are local and national organizations, they sometimes have also suggested that, what's wrong with the status quo? And it has taken a while to kind of get to that understanding that they are best placed to drive action that is meaningful for their communities. So I think it's been a constant dialogue of mindset shift, cultural shift. The systems and processes are the easier bit. I think it's much more of the political will and the willingness of organizations to transform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rhea. A lot to learn from, and I'm sure your colleagues will have reflections on this. So let me turn to our Plan International, of course, is a very big player in the sector. It's characterized by strong and sometimes heavy structures, yet it seems your organization finds quite impressive ways of dealing with the current both political and funding crisis. Amongst other things, you have established very quickly a solidarity fund for partners. You're exploring closer collaboration, if not even mergers with other organizations. So can you help us understand what makes plans so agile and how can you scale these ideas throughout the organization?
Thank you very much, Wolfgang. And this is a wonderful opportunity to reflect and share on the state of the world and how the CSOs are pivoting, not only to adapt, but also to reinvent themselves. And you said it, Plan is a big organization with a presence in 80 countries through different entities. And, you know, despite sometimes being process heavy and having to coordinate between multiple stakeholders and structure, we remain agile when need be. And so thank you for allowing me to reflect on this question. We've seen continuous change and over the years, and this past year has been particularly disruptive. And Plan has been putting in place mechanism to respond to change for some years now. And it is not perfect by any means, but we have the structure in place that we call the one plan approach. The idea is really how do we ensure that we can anticipate and take action in a quicker and more agile way across the organization. For instance, and for example, in anticipation of the change in the US government administration, we've started discussing in very early 2024 how we might respond to that policy changes, and such as also the potential reinstatement or expansion of the Mexico City policy. That's where we were. So, you reference to the Solidarity Fund, but I would like to speak on that as one piece of a wider response to the shifting in the global context. And I want to clarify, that few months down the lines, we might have not been the organization that has taken the first hit as hard as many of our peers, but we are all affected along the road and are exploring ways to prepare the future when it will be harder to secure resources, and also where the public perception and confidence in the work that we are doing in our sector is less granted. So in the wake of the US administration drastic funding cuts and the shuttering of USAID, we quickly established different work streams. One were to assess and respond to the immediate funding impact on the USG grant pauses and stopped. So the idea was, how do we support local partners that are being hit hard by the certain funding cliff? So the idea of the Solidarity Fund was born out of this discussion, and we wanted to be able to mobilize our different partners to be able to support our local partner in operation and programming. But we also put in place a mechanism to continually monitor and tracking the ODA across the donor landscape and be better informed for immediate and long-term funding situation. We also, Wolfgang, reflected a lot on our narrative and the necessity to refresh it, to be able to continue supporting the adolescent girls and young people for which we are working and continue support this positive impact. So, not changing the work we do or our value, but trying now to be able to speak this non-jargony language and recognize gender equality and girls' right language might resonate less and with less various audience. Of course, we, on the influencing and advocacy side, preparing ourselves, analyzing the civic space and the rollback on rights, ensuring that funding is there for girls to be able to continue their activism. I will stop there for now, and I'm sure that we have opportunity to dig a little bit more in that.
Yeah, thanks, Awa. I mean, maybe following up on one of the things that you've said, I mean, reassessing the narratives, it's something that everyone in the sector, I think, is struggling with. But for Plan in particular, Plan International a few years back has started implementing a fairly ambitious and radical rights-based approach. It was the right of the children, the right of the girls in particular. And surely this approach, it's not just a narrative. You're being challenged by the current rollback. How are you dealing with this other than maybe softening the language a little bit?
I think, it is we still strongly rooted in our girl-centeredness and youth-led approach, because we believe from decades of experience on the ground that this is where we can make the most significant change and the most significant impact in the lives of the children we are working with and for. So, I said we are also updating our program offer to link it closely with the fundraising reality. We are championing a better articulated, integrated, holistic intervention around the girl-centered programming and influencing. And, we now have, 5 thematic areas, more focused, cross-cutting priorities, and also indicate how our community approach may look now, both in humanitarian and development settings. And I think that's what is really important, to have all the different stakeholders within plan to be able to do this reflection and pivot in this work. And also another piece of the agility and scale is, constantly be scanning the horizon and building on the trends. And to be able to do that, it is important that we rely on strategic partners at all levels, but specifically at local level, to keep our ears on the ground collectively, compare information and collaborate. And that is really important, that we continue to build up on this while we remain steady and convinced that the entry points on girls' rights and human rights need to be preserved.
Thank you very much, Awa. And of course, we all wish you courage in this because it is a courageous undertaking. I'm now moving to Chad. Chad, good morning. You're calling in from the west coast of the US, so appreciation for getting up early. You're representing the World YMCA, and the World YMCA is one of the largest NGO networks in the sector. People might not know this, at least when it comes to coverage and outreach in so many countries. I've heard from your CEO some weeks back that you've recently found out that many of your entities don't know enough of each other. So you're developing a tailor-made artificial intelligence for the organization. So another kind of big disruption and innovation, of course. How easy is it, and what are you doing to introduce this type of innovation in a century-old network? And what outcomes are you hoping for or even experiencing?
Thank you, Wolfgang, and greetings, everyone, and apologies for it. It is 5 a.m. here in San Francisco, so it's an honor to be with this esteemed panel. As Wolfgang mentioned, if folks are not aware, the YMCA is present in over 120 countries, having a global reach of 65 million people. We're grounded in our 2030 vision, which was crowdsourced by co-creating with everyone who would engage in conversation what the needs that individuals, especially young people across the world, found as their key challenges in society to address. And we came up with a just world, meaningful work, community well-being, a sustainable planet. And that is the core for the innovation that Wolfgang mentioned that we are embarking on around artificial intelligence. At the World YMCA, we have partnerships with a lot of entities that are helping us to co-create AI solutions to the challenges, as Wolfgang mentioned, of capturing and communicating impact and leveraging artificial intelligence aspirationally in a way that is human-centered, that is sustainable, that is ethical, that is equitable, and that is grounded in addressing today's needs. Now, that is not an easy task. We're partnering with entities like Hypercycle, HP, Microsoft, AWS, Anthropic. We're pulling multiple entities to the table to try to ensure that we're able to craft and chart the way forward. Although the artificial intelligence world is moving quickly, the YMCA is a very large nonprofit, moves very slowly. That has presented a number of challenges. Our dream is to co-create an equitable access of a front door to artificial intelligence and a brain, an internet with a brain, if you will, that will be able to help assess, organize, translate data, and be able to especially focus on those YMCAs globally that do not have the resources to be able to capture and communicate data aligned with our Vision 2030 in ways that funders, partners, communities can support. We also have a dream of enabling AI to support those YMCAs that are most under-resourced and ensuring that young people are able to dream and catch up to an equitable distribution of work in this new world. We all know that AI is already having a profound negative impact on white-collar jobs across the globe. And here we are, the YMCA, putting our stake in the ground, attempting to say we're going to stand in the gap and do this right. That is extremely challenging. I'm also based at the YMCA of Greater San Francisco here, where I'm a head of strategy. We're trying to leverage the responsibility that we in the Bay Area, where artificial intelligence is housed, have to push on the industry and partner with those that are aligned with our values. That also is challenging. Resourcing around making sure that our AI solutions are moving slow and intentional, but not so out of date as often happens in the NGO sector, that it's not helpful in the context of what's happening in the world. The last is engaging young people who oftentimes are far ahead of awareness of artificial intelligence or any technology solution than we are, in ensuring that we are meeting the needs and leveraging that strength. So it's a challenge, and we would not be able to do this without all of our YMCAs across the world stepping in. I'm here representing Carlos Sandy, our Secretary General, and Razvan, our Head of Strategy, and also just the swath of folks across the movement who are endeavoring to do this right.
Thank you, Chad. Fascinating. And, everything from developing and rolling out, but also dealing with let me say this cautiously, a complicated environment, regional environment that you're in.
Yes.
You have some interesting players in the neighborhood, so I'm sure you're navigating this with caution. But maybe one particular question, artificial intelligence excites and at the same time scares everyone. How do you deal in your own organization with the anxiety that certainly comes with this kind of initiative?
That's a great question. Carefully and with a lot of humility, I think would be the answer. My colleague Lloyd from the African Alliance is here. We're part of a World YMCA AI strategy team. That group meets virtually every 3 weeks, and a primary focus of that conversation is how do we deal with that trepidation? There are YMCAs and leaders within YMCAs that won't touch AI with a 10-foot pole, and that is okay. And there are YMCAs, perhaps like my own, that are moving maybe too quickly, and that is also okay. And so I think a part of the need and the opportunity here is to meet individuals and communities and YMCAs, in our case, where they are, to frame in the context of our organizational values as guideposts for conversations, for innovation, for dialogue, for partnerships, and to really also always go back to, is what we're creating helping or hurting? Right? And is what we're creating helping or hurting, and are there opportunities to ensure that we have the right thought partnership and thought leadership from outside of the Y, maybe sometimes from outside of the nonprofit sector, and also global perspectives. What AI looks like in Africa looks very different than what AI looks like in Asia, for example. And there's responsibilities that we have as a global entity to really do with and not to, and co-create a future together.
Yeah, very cool. And we'll come back to this in the second half of the discussion, because there's already quite a bit of reaction in the chat to this. People are you're talking about how they're trying to implement, human-centered AI, and we all know the challenges. But I also want to remind us of what Rhea said earlier, the cultural and mindset change that we have to work on in our organizations to allow for these innovations. And we got to do that carefully, because we stand for values, and we work with the people that we work with. And, this is just a reality we need to prioritize. I'm moving on to Benoit. Benoit, you're the interim executive director of SOS Children's Villages, an organization that I would say over the years have exercised a fairly successful model to support and fundraise your operation. This has made you maybe to a certain extent independent of the current political turbulences. However, you are investing in innovative ways to diversify and also to sustain your business model. So can you share with us how a big and successful organization manages the necessary agility to adapt to changing donor, but also sponsor behaviors?
Thank you. Thank you very much for this question, because for SOS Children's Village International, it was very important to be able to sustain the work we are doing with the children all over the world. We are a federation of 135 members that ensure that no child grow up alone. And in our 2030 strategy, we had, and we are still having, a very ambitious growth in terms of number of children that we are supporting. Unfortunately, because the needs are increasing, so we wanted really to make sure that we can support all this big part of these children. And historically, we had a successful and long fundraising model built on sponsorship, as you mentioned, and individual giving. And this model is from north to south. But today's donors are changing. They expect more transparency, measurable impact, and also more emotional connection. So it's why we needed to have a more agile model, and that could keep pace with those expectations and also in line with the objective of the strategy 2030. But allowing this growth and also this sustainable support for these children needed to reinvent how we were working. And particularly, we understood that a huge potential was existing in a lot of countries in Latin America, Africa, Asia, or Central Europe. It's why we have created a sustainable fundraising engine called Impact Fund for Children. And it works like a venture capital for social good. So in the principle is to provide multi-year grants to market with high potential, but limited initial resources to start. Starting a real fundraising to allow financial independency and sustainability, you need to have quite a significant investment at the beginning. And it is about that. It is about the solidarity of our member from the many European countries to support their member in around the globe to be able to start and to be financially self-sufficient and independent. So it's really building a local fundraising capacity, digital innovation, and allowing each country to adapt a plan to its own context. It's more than a co-creation, it's really a creation from every member in a country to develop their strategy. It's totally different to fundraise, for example, in Morocco, India, or in Brazil. So this really need to have this bottom-up approach where this ownership is very strong. And what makes it agile and is the flexibility. Is the flexibility in designing the plan, adjusting it, and reinvest part of the new income locally raised. So for an example, it's about 40% of the income that was locally raised. We're reinvesting to make sure that there is a sustainability and a growth. And it's a very virtuous cycle. I think we have been able to achieve around 30 MS being totally independent now financially. And just to give some figures, since 2017, we have invested around 41 million euro in 51 markets or different countries across the 5 continents. And at the end, it has generated more than 88 million income. So the number of regular donors that were joining this cause for children, it's around 500,000. So you see, this is quite a big scale. And all of this going very fast. And, with this, keeping in mind that we need to have a global frame of accountability, learning, and really empowering MA from the global source. At the beginning, it's really about supporting more children and giving more ownership to the MAs in the 5 continents. But with financial independency, you also have a kind of shift of power, governance reform, because voice from the south started to really, really change our internal governance, meaning that if you are, for example, India is the biggest operation around the world. And then when you are self-sufficient, then you are able to raise different opinion. So the diversity is coming also, and the need to change the governance was very high. And just to end on that, now it allows also a different form of solidarity between countries. For example, recently, SOS Children's Villages Tunisia launched a fundraising campaign for children in Palestine. And they were able to raise $500,000. So now they are supporting their brother and sister in Palestine. So you see, it's changing a little bit the traditional model from Europe or America to the rest of the world. So that's quite a big success. And as you said, it made us less vulnerable to political change because it's based on individual giving.
Thank you, Benoit. And of course, it's been impressive to see both the strength and the power of your local entities and regional entities, and at the same time, listening to your innovative approaches, venture capital, impact fund for children. This is very advanced language. Now I'm wondering, have you been criticized for taking the space for other local actors who also want to be successful in fundraising and maybe can't compete with the engine that you're talking about that you have available?
It can be seen as a competition, but I think we were perhaps the first to assess the potential of this market, and the potential that you can have in a lot of countries in terms of fundraising and the capacity for themselves to really be totally independent in designing their program, their strategy through the fundraising. But it requires some prerequisite for that. And in most of all these member associations, we have been supporting them and we have been working with them for the last 50 years. So it's to have this legitimacy, to have this capacity, you need to be very strong locally. So it's not an easy access because your brand need to be recognized within the country. And you need also to have some very strong global capacity to support that because it's a very specific market, and individual giving is also very, very specific. So it requires all of this. And yes, if you are a local actor with very limited support, it's difficult to be able to achieve that. And it's where I think as an actor of the civil society, we need to break the silos somehow, but we are not at this stage today. But yes, breaking the silo and supporting each other is very important. I think that in terms of yes, uncertainty, solidarity is the best way to move forward.
Yeah, thank you, Benoit. And of course, to everyone, of course, on this panel, we have representatives of large ICSOs, international civil society organizations, all of them being shareholders, co-supporters of the center. And of course, in the conference, we have a much wider kind of audience also represented on panels. And in the chats that I'm observing while we're all speaking, there were a couple of calls, how are we doing in terms of supporting our local partners, local CSOs, not just taking, innovative steps, but making sure that the entire sector benefits. So it might be something that you may want to consider in the second round of questions and answers. But of course, I also want to share with you that one or two people complimented everyone that, yes, we're trying to be innovative, but at the same time, it looks like we're holding very high the values and the mandates of the organizations that we all stand for. And I heard that from all four of you. So with this maybe shorter second round of questions, and I'm starting with Awa, a little bit of an early warning. What have we heard from colleagues on the panel that made you more curious, that you maybe want to challenge, or that your organization can learn from? Yeah, what do you think of what you've heard from the colleagues?
It's really, really super energizing to hear about all those innovation that we are doing. From Help Age, I would love to learn more about how your transformation journey is fostering innovation and creating new opportunities for shared learning. We are reviewing our operating model now at Plan International. And I'm sure there will be insights that we can take on board, even if we might not go as radical as you into a network model. But what would be your, takeaway advice or the elements that are really fostering that innovation? And if you allow me, I also have a question for YMCA. Bringing cutting edge technology into a long established network like YMCA with all the diversity we know inside the organization is really a bold move. What has been the hardest cultural or operational challenge so far? And how are you getting everyone on board across such a diverse membership? For us, our EI policy is quite minimal for now, and I would love to hear from you. And if I'm allowed, the last question to SOS, when you mention your business model, of course, it resonates with all of us, the willingness to be able to mobilize more with the, locally led approach and having this this global organization supporting. How are you seeing opportunities to innovate together with other organizations? That would be really interesting to know. Thank you, and over to you.
Thanks, Awa. And we will follow the proposed order. I mean, why don't we continue with Rhea? And of course, you don't only have to answer, but please also do ask questions so that we continue the engagement, the dialogue. Rhea, please.
Thanks, Wolfgang, and thanks, Eva. I think, before I come to Eva's question, I do feel listening to everybody, I can see so much convergence in terms of the direction of travel. And I think we all talked about how do our respective organizations become more adaptive, agile. And I think some of the things that I was reflecting on, whether it's the Solidarity Fund or the AI-enabled systems or innovative financing that Benoit, you talked about, which were ideas that were not present a decade ago. So I guess all of us are trying to answer some of those fundamental questions. How do we diversify income streams, share power, share risk, all those things? And I think AI is the new one on the block, because I think from our own reflection, one of the things I keep hearing is, what does it mean for data protection, information governance, while it has huge potential? So some of those questions are not answered. But I just also wanted to say, I agree with Chad about, the world externally is changing so fast. But internally, while we are talking about all these fundamental shifts, I don't think our internal systems or cultures are evolving fast enough to match our ambitions. So I think maybe moving on to what, Eva, you were talking about, innovations, I think while the intention and the idea is to be led by the network members in terms of what are the problems, what are the unsolved problems. So I think we are moving in that direction, but we are not yet there that, if I could tell you that these are the top 10 common problems. But what we have tried to do is narrow down our focus through a thematic lens to really unpack what are the innovations required for solving some of the long-standing problems that continue to be present in the lives of older men and women. So there is a strategy, there is a bringing together of the stakeholders, not just the network members, but broader stakeholders, including donors, to deliberate on those problems, and also engaging with the private sector. Because one of the examples I'd like to share is there is this we talk about technology and innovation and AI, but when we look at basic things like glasses, or there is a list of 50 products that WHO says that will be assistive for the lives of older men and women. And the fact is that they're not being manufactured in low and middle income countries. So we are living in the world where there are parallel worlds, unfortunately. So while AI and technology is spearheading on one direction, but there are other contexts where that's not happening. So I hope we kind of share all this thinking together, and I move towards, I think Benoit was saying, it's more than co-creation. It's much more of collective competencies that we require now. And I think the phase of single agencies delivering it all is gone. So I think we need to think about how do we share resources, how do we look at problems together as agencies in the sector and also outside the sector. Back to you, Wolfgang. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhea. And we got to acknowledge that even in a conference like this, where we had over 1,000 registrations and several hundred attendants, I think the presence of non-sector participants is relatively low. Even donors, have decided not to join too much of the discussion. So I think we have a lot to do here to go over our boundaries. Chat, I think you need to give us some answers of how we can all benefit from your wisdom, but please also feel free to address some of the questions that you might have to the panelists outside your own field of experience, maybe.
Yeah, no, I think I'm blown away by how much we and I at the YMCA can learn and need to learn off of Rhea and Benoit. I think that oftentimes there's so much in size and scope that can be a gift, but also a challenge. I think I'm just spinning from your conversation, what you just elevated. I think our sector is one of the last trusted entities in the global fabric of society. I think that polarization and marginalization and segmentation across multiple dimensions of diversity, geography, identity, and belief is challenging all of our countries and our world and our communities. And our young people are facing the biggest swath of angst because of that, the biggest swath of inequity. That is a landscape on which we are trying to then move our global federated nonprofit NGO toward leveraging AI in a way that's helpful. The question that you asked of, I'm sitting with it, it's trust. It's trust to put data in places, and then trust even within the Y movement to be able to share that data with other YMCAs, even within the same city or country, never mind the world. It's how we collect data. It's to whom we report that data. It is for what purpose that data is used. It's who in power or privilege shapes the questions or the systems, or what entities control the software. Somebody meant, I think, Ava, you mentioned, we are talking about AI when people don't have access to Wi-Fi is irrelevant. Talking about AI when people do not have technology systems in their hands is irrelevant. Yet that's what's happening. And again, AI, and we're trying so hard to get this right in the Y, we're failing left and right just as much as we're succeeding. But we have to recognize that technology, including AI, can either be an accelerant in a digital divide or a tool to address that, to fill that gap. And we're straddling that line a bit. Last thing that I would just mention, and Benoit, I was blown away by some of what you were sharing. We haven't even begun to think about the implications of sort of fiscal innovation in a way that could connect to this. My mind is, I'm learning so much, y'all. This has been an incredible conversation. But I would just love to learn if there's time for each of you to dive even more into some of the points that we've been elevating. Thanks, Wolf.
And good chat. So, Benoit, you have an open door here to go through, talking both about your fiscal innovations, but also, I mean, you and I, we talked a lot about trust and culture change and all of that. Well, I'm sure that these questions resonate a lot with what you're experiencing and how we are able to make progress. Over to you, Benoit.
Yeah, thank you. what I'm hearing from my colleague, it's really I'm impressed by the courage I'm hearing from the other. The courage and also the capacity to think outside the box, the capacity to take risks, because yeah, really when you want to work on a new or changing a business model or a structure, digital innovation, whatever, you are always taking the risk. Even if we know that data is a new oil, but how you handle this data and you protect it because there is a lot of legal requirement behind, etc. So all of this is really, I think, yes, I'm glad to see all the courage. And the question of how we can bridge this all together. I think yes, the trust that you are mentioning is very important because our organization exists because there is trust in what we are doing, in how we are doing it, and the purpose of our organization. We are value driven. And I think we really need to move in a new phase. Wolfgang, we are discussing a lot about shift of power, delocalization and localization, sorry, and so on. And these topics can be only done when we are taking bold action and courageous action. And this is not only word, it has to happen. It has to happen in terms of a structure. We are global structure, and sometimes we don't represent this diversity. We need to make sure that we can bring this diversity forward. And the last thing is, I believe that how we are set up, how we are structured today is more and more challenged with this very hierarchical structure with a very heavy and powerful center. And I think Elpage is really very courageous, the way you have been through the risk you have taken for your own organization. And of course, when you take risk for your organization, there is also always a risk for the participant in your program. And then you have been successful to make this major shift. So I think we need to bridge, we need to learn, we need to share. And I agree with you that I'm learning a lot because somehow in our niche, we are like anticipating what can be the future of the civil society. And again, I want to come back to the solidarity. The issue we can have as a actor in a civil society is that we are often working in silos, not internationally, but because we have so many things to do that we have limited time to really look into the synergy. And today world is more and more polarized, and we are really more and more pushed in terms of our role. So I think it's really time for us to look how we can bridge and come together to make sure that we will be able to continue to deliver our purpose. So that will be my word. Thank you.
No, and thanks also for kind of the encouragement and the positive vibes. Now, I need to disturb this a little bit, with maybe a final bit of a provocative round, because yes, I would agree. I think there's a lot of effort in innovating and, maybe also making our models more appropriate and more legitimate and more adjusted to what today's world is. And there was a question on the chat by Sandrine Molina, who's been a faithful participant over the last 3 days, very active. Thanks for all your comments. And you were basically asking Rhea that in the beginning you said you're returning to who you were always supposed to be. Now that's a wonderful ambition because our organizations were founded in a certain spirit, and sometimes you might have lost a little bit of that. But yesterday there was a comment, and I'm not quite sure who made it, but it kind of resonated also with people because someone says, our organizations are maybe a car built in 1945 who are trying to run on today's highways. And as much as we want to modernize and accelerate and whatnot, there might be a bit of an issue here. And I would like you in the last round to reflect on 2 questions. First of all, are we actually successful or are we naive in terms of trying to modernize this 1945 Chevrolet or whatever? And secondly, a question I think that comes up, and again in the chats and everyone, our relationship with local organizations, with local partners, even individuals, and someone talked about Belém now, our relationship to movements, to indigenous people. How can we improve that? Because we're organizations, but we need to focus on extraordinary organizational matters, like how do we work with others? So with these two questions, I want to ask you for final statement of 1 or 2 minutes. Don't feel shy also to be provocative yourself. And I'm starting again with Awa, because you've been waiting longest now. Awa. And you are on mute.
Again, thank you very much. I think this is a wonderful session, and I hope we'll have opportunity to dig into all those innovations that we discovered today. I think to respond to your question, I would say that we are being realistic. We are not naive. We know that these disruptions are fundamental and that we have to change and now to be able to continue, be impactful, because that's what matters. Be there for the community people, girls for which and with whom we are doing the work to create a better world. It is still possible. And I think we really need to remain that determined and that positive. And I think what excites me in this conversation is how civil society is embracing this change and being determined not to compromise with our fundamental values, but open to explore new spaces. I think we are seeing the digital tools opening the new door, changing funding models, becoming more collaborative. All this, the pooled resource. We are seeing organizations being ready to go from rigid hierarchy to more flexible ways of working. If we want to be and continue to be a civil society that thrives, that means that we need to aim for resilience, we need to aim for adaptability above all, and ensuring that we remain relevant in terms of our impact and trusted in terms of the values that we continue to communicate. For us, building resilience is at the heart of our work, and we will continue to do that through actively scanning the horizon, but also in partnership. And we believe the organization of the future has to be more decentralized. The shift to local actor, our localization work is on top of our agenda. We need to deliberately be locally led, globally connected. We need to learn on the digital aspect, and we need to, all of us, and I think it's Rhea who mentioned it, act as convener and catalyst rather than just service provider. The future is about trust, it's about agility, but it's about holding the lines on our values and continue to act deliberately to change this world in the positive way, because it is still possible.
Thank you, Awa. I'll turn on to chat. What's your take on the ambition to modernize and at the same time not lose our ability to work with the most marginalized, the most poorest people around the world, which, by the way, includes, and thanks for this intervention from Pakistan, people with disabilities who have that extra challenge. Chat, over to you.
Yeah, no, I think first I following you, Ava. You are so powerful in how you're speaking. I'm trying to make sure that I can keep up with the energy that you're bringing to this and the wisdom. So I think that we have to wrestle with, as civil society organizations, as NGOs, with understanding why we do what we do, and if why we do what we do is because we've always done it, or because it is working to actually meet the needs that we're trying to address. And also a part of, I think, our responsibility is to address, my colleague calls it, from a skill set and mindset shifts. Sometimes it's easier to try to build new skills, but we just graze right over the mindset, the culture, the fear, the trepidation, the cultural nuances of why the humans that are leading some of our CFOs, including all of us, might be a little bit paused by some of the innovations, whether that is AI or it's also engaging a community that might be marginalized in one of our areas. It's the same human reaction to something we don't know, understand, haven't lived. And that's a part of what I think we do need to just wrestle with. I think the other piece is going back to this, and I see all the chats about trust and accountability. There is no, as someone said brilliantly in the chat, there is no accountability without trust. And there is no trust without community and relationships. And there are no relationships if we cannot find common ground across divides. That has to be the foundation for how all of us within our organizations and through our organizations across the world can build bridges of unity and compassion and empathy, but it requires us to lean into that with which we are most discomfort, that with which we are most afraid, and that with which we are most hesitant as humans, as CSOs, as leaders, and as communities. I think that is where we can find the antidote to the hate and the challenge and the inequity, and find hope and joy and love and peace.
Thank you, Chad. And Benoit, now over to you. What do you think are the underlying principles of us being able to cope with the challenges, become future fit, maintain our values and mandates, and at the same time modernize as much as we can? Please, final words from you.
Thank you. Looking ahead, I don't know. I see three key developments guiding us forward. First, the data transparency. The technology is more and more driving our work. So it's where perhaps we have an old Chevrolet, but inside you have tablets and everything. Otherwise, your dashboard will not work. And perhaps sometimes the car looks old from outside, but inside it's quite modern. And why? Because we need all this data now. Because if we can really be transparent about what we are doing, the impact we have, the efficiency, then we will build again trust with our partners, and not bureaucracy. Perhaps we had a trend the last 20 years really to build huge bureaucracy within organization. So then the second is more about the ethical technology. I truly believe that all these digital tools help us in engaging directly the donor personally, while protecting human and dignity. For example, in individual giving is very important. And I think having hand-to-hand processes is a future for us to really also show an impact and perhaps also to reduce our overall cost. And local ownership. I think this is a key dimension, the co-creation solution, the role of the communities. Now, it's a good progress, but they are not only receiving head; they are also actors. They also have they say they are also part of the design of the program that support them. So this is really important. Because today we have to overcome some barrier, and we need to evolve from a strong institution in a collaborative ecosystem. Funding, knowledge, credibility, technology, a lot of things. We are not there, but I think it's important. Again, the world is changing, the polarization, the tension are increasing. Civil society need to reinvent themselves, their role, and not compromise the value and the why we are existing. And I'm quite optimistic because I see a lot of, and I have heard today also, a lot of courageous organization taking bold action, decisive action to move on. So for us as student villages, it's really staying global because it's this global solidarity that is making us strong, but believing in the local action, investing in the local people, innovation and partnership for every child. So this will be my last word. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rhea, of course, we want to hear from you. You've been receiving so much praise for the courage of HelpAge and the movement that you are pursuing, and also from the chat, I think people are really appreciating. But please, I mean, your hope coming from which developments in the sector, and help us appreciate each other on the way forward, please.
Thanks, Wolfgang, and thanks for all the comments. I think, I mean, the journey on localization in particular has begun. I mean, we still see a tiny percentage going to local actors, but I think one thing I always feel is that when it comes to accountability, and I think somebody said it in the chat as well, is I think we need to think beyond local actors, accountability from local actors to the communities. And in the discourse of localization, that often gets lost. But I think some of the practical things that we are seeing in our own journey is simple things like talking about risks that we forget to talk about. How do you establish a partnership? And you talk about risk, talk about proportional risk sharing, move the system towards humane compliance systems, not those 120 pages of due diligence requirements. And how do we advocate with donors? I think those are all things. And I was meeting one of our network members who works in a very tight civic space, and he was saying that we do not want funding or we do not want anything. What we want is understanding. What we want is solidarity. What we want is co-thinking space and that solidarity that we are all in this together. So how do you move into that space? So I think there's a lot to unpack in those things, but I think if there was one indicator, I would say, do our own budgets reflect the commitment to localization? How are we investing in the capacity of local actors? What are those key metrics that we can share with each other to say, this is what we are doing so that local and national organizations become financially resilient? Because I think it's important that they are able to absorb the shocks. So back to you, Wolfgang. I know we are tight on time.
Thanks for that. Lots of wonderful inspirational comments and yeah, the approaches that everyone is taking. I want to thank everyone in the panel. I want to thank the two sign language interpreters. Sorry for a little bit of overtime. Of course, thank you, Pauline, for the wonderful graphic visualization. We'll share this link with everyone who was not able to watch the Global Perspectives Conference. And we hope that you'll be able to stay on for the final session, which will start in about 5 minutes. It's a very interactive, kind of forward-looking session. I have a lot of voices about what do we do with all this wisdom. But meanwhile, thanks for inspiring us so much in this panel. Thank you.